Alright, before we get into today's video, I just wanted to address something out of character, unscripted, just off the cuff. I have a couple thank yous to get through. First of all, thank you guys for 1,300 subscribers. That is amazing. I can't fathom just how many of you guys decided I was worth sticking around with after that Green Lantern video. That is amazing. So, thank all of you so much. And I'd also like to thank my good friend Degenerate Jay for teaching me really everything I know about how YouTube works. From how I do my thumbnails to the scripting, the voiceover, and just how the site itself operates. So thank you, Jay, for everything you've taught me. And without out of the way, let's get right into the video. Now, if one of you guys asked me what's one thing that DC definitively does better than Marvel, my first response is, why do we gotta pit them against each other? Can't I just enjoy both? But then to actually answer the question, I'd say DC generally handles the concept of legacies far better. Characters who inherit the mantle from their mentors and make it their own, with such examples being the various Blue Beetles, Terry McGinnis's Batman, or entire teams like the Justice Society, the Titans, and even the Legion of Superheroes to an extent. The Green Lanterns also kind of touch on this, but that's more like a job position than it is a personal mantle. But what I consider the best examples of legacy heroes done right is the Flash. The Flash family is consistently some of my favorite casts in all of comics, and I'm excited to finally talk about these guys. It was a treat seeing each new Flash try to live up to who came before, as well as make the mantle their own. That is until DC fragged it up beyond all repair. To all of you wondering how they managed to foobar such a good thing, first, let's run through a quick history lesson. I swear that's the only running or speed pun you'll get out of me for the remainder of this video. First up, Jay Garrick sped onto the scene in January 1940. Not only the first person to bear the Flash mantle, but also the first speedster in comics as far as I can tell. He gained his powers in a lab accident when he inhaled hard water vapors during a smoke break. That seems like some ridiculously unsafe working conditions, but hey, it was the 1940s, so I shouldn't be too surprised. He was great at two things: running fast and punching a lot of Nazis, and proved to be one of the more popular Golden Age heroes, later becoming a founding member of the Justice Society, the first real superhero team in comics. Despite his popularity, though, his comic was quietly cancelled and he faded into obscurity, due to interest in superhero comics taking a nosedive after World War II ended. Smash cut to the mid-1950s. The Comics Code was in full effect, and DC wanted to revitalize their superhero comics, starting with The Flash. And as such, we got the second and arguably most popular Flash, Barry Allen. He gained his powers in a lab accident when lightning struck a convenient shelf of chemicals and wow. I was hoping lab safety guidelines would have improved a decade later, but apparently not. Barry seemingly had no connection to Jay in the slightest beyond sharing a name and lightning motif. This would change in the Flash of Two Worlds story where Jay and Barry officially meet, which is also the first use of the multiverse concept in fiction. This story acted as a sort of passing of the torch and would retroactively establish Jay as being on Earth 2, which is why their paths never crossed until this point. Jay was warmly received, but Barry seems to have been the smash hit DC was hoping for, single-handedly kicking off the Silver Age of comics and giving the DC universe a much-needed jumpstart. After an impressive 27-year run as the Flash, Barry would eventually sacrifice himself in the Crisis on Infinite Earths, pushing his body past his limits to destroy a machine the Anti-Monitor needed for his plans to destroy the multiverse. Needless to say, dying to save the multiverse is quite the high note to end on. Let's see how this next guy fills his shoes. Wally West is the third, and my personal favorite, Flash. He gained his powers when he and his Aunt Iris were visiting her boyfriend Barry at his lab, and Wally was struck by— oh, come on! That's it, I'm calling OSHA. Wally then became Barry's sidekick as Kid Flash, and even became a founding member of the Teen Titans and fought alongside both for years. Needless to say, Barry's death in the Crisis was devastating. He was a better father figure to Wally than his actual father, along with being the Flash's #1 fan even before he got his powers. Wally reluctantly took on the mantle, but had quite a rough start both in and out of universe. In the real world, Barry fans were livid the hero they grew up reading was killed off and immediately replaced. And in universe, he was feeling immense pressure living up to the legacy of a guy who died saving the universe, even having a mental block preventing him from running past Barry's top speed because he was just that freaked out by the idea of replacing Barry. But eventually, over time, fans warmed up to Wally's The Flash, even becoming a fan favorite and a generation's definitive Flash, even managing to secure the spotlight as the DC animated universe's one and only Flash. He even overcame his mental block by stopping Barry's greatest enemy, the Reverse Flash, from enacting a scheme to ruin Barry's image, unlocking his full potential and surpassing Barry in the process. In doing so, he also gained the respect of the greater DCU, with many of Barry's longtime friends remarking how proud he'd be and landing a spot on the Justice League, finally being seen as an equal by the very people he'd grown up idolizing. Much like the incidents that granted them such incredible powers, Wally would also disappear in a similar way to his Uncle Barry, pushing his body to the limits and disappearing into the Speed Force to imprison a rampaging Superboy Prime. So, now that Wally's gone, where do we go next? Okay, this is where our problems begin. Our fourth, and at the time newest, Flash is Bart Allen, grandson of Barry Allen, hailing from the 31st century, operating under the hero names Impulse and later Kid Flash, eventually taking up the mantle of the Flash in Infinite Crisis, having the entirety of the Speed Force contained within him after Wally disappears. So, with Barry having a nice lengthy 30-year tenure as the Flash, and Wally having a shorter but still significant 19-year run, Bart must have had a decent chunk of time in the mantle, right? No. He crossed his finish line after just 13 issues of his series. Just barely a year, where his speed is taken from him and he's beaten to death by the Rogues. He didn't even have the courtesy of going out with a bang like the previous two Flashes. So, you may be wondering, why was Bart's tenure so short? Was it fan backlash, low sales, editorial meddling? Well, I did some research and it was all three. Truly the trifecta of character assassination. For obvious reasons, Wally fans weren't too happy about their Flash being axed and immediately Hey, wait a minute. Hey, I guess now they know how Barry fans felt 2 decades prior. So, fans boycotted the book in protest, which contributed to low sales, and eventually editorial kicked out the current writers and got Mark Guggenheim to kill him off in the last 5 issues. Well, if you're going to end the book by killing off your main character as a means to an end, getting the guy responsible for inflicting the Green Lantern movie and Olicity onto the world would certainly do it. So, as a response to Bart's run as the Flash not being the success they expected, they immediately brought back Wally to appease fans and editors alike, which I feel was a major mistake. Now again, to reiterate, Wally is my favorite Flash. He's the one I grew up with due to shows like Justice League and Young Justice. But I firmly think DC should have stuck with their guns on this one and said Bart is the Flash now from here on out. Wally had to work for it for fans to truly accept him, but Bart never got that chance with the decision to kill him off being made not even 8 issues into his tenure, so not even a full year at that point. It was about 3 years before he was accepted at large, and that was due to Mark Waid really putting in 110% effort in to do it. So, this is the beginning of the end for the Flash's legacy, but it gets worse from here. Well, good news for Bart fans. He didn't stay very dead as both him and Barry made their return in the Final Crisis event through various means for both of them. So, now this means that you have Jay, Barry, Wally, and Bart all active, but do all of them have a place in the DC universe at once? I'd like to think yes, all these characters have their own unique quirks and niches you can tap into, and it's just nice seeing them all interact with each other like a big happy Flash family. But the higher-ups at DC thought otherwise because only a few short years later, Flashpoint happens. Barry breaks the timeline and Bart dies again in order to give Barry this energy boost he needs to fix his mistake. Man, this is just salt in the wound if you're a Bart fan. Dude dies twice in 4 years. So, as a result of Flashpoint, the New 52 happens, and Barry is the one and only Flash with no legacy to speak of. Jay is back to being relegated to Earth 2, Wally doesn't exist, and there is a kid Flash named Bart Allen, but there's zero relation and it's not even the guy's real name. Boy, I sure am glad Batman gets to keep his entire history, but everything else gets scrubbed. Eventually, a New 52 version of Wally did appear, but wasn't received well. Mainly because the way he was depicted felt flat out racist to a lot of people. But he stuck around for a while and got powers of his own, but he ultimately just wasn't the Wally people wanted. So when DC Rebirth came around, he was retconned as being an original character entirely who just shared a name with the original Wally. Speaking of the original Wally, he was brought back for real this time at the start of DC Rebirth, with the New 52 version currently going by Ace to avoid confusion. But since this is technically the New 52 timeline, he was never the Flash, only being Barry's sidekick for a while, which was scrubbed from the universe. Barry gives him the Flash title anyway, he makes a snazzy new outfit for himself, fans rejoice. Jay and Bart also made their return, apparently being trapped in the Speed Force for the entire New 52, with their New 52 incarnations being forgotten about entirely. So, all four people to take the name of the Flash are all back, and it's all kind of a mess, to be honest. Exacerbated by the fact that there are now even more Flashes. The first being Avery Ho, a teenager who was struck by a Speed Force storm at the beginning of DC Rebirth and began operating as the Flash of China alongside other counterparts in the Justice League of China. And the other being Jess Chambers in the DC Future State event, which may or may not be the actual future of the DCU, but probably won't be. Admittedly, a really cool design. I like their look a lot. So, the Flash mantle is kind of a mess lately. And I'm not even counting the family as a whole, like Jesse and Johnny Quick or Max Mercury, since they don't also share the same title. But with Avery and Jess here, and Wally just being given the title without any of that history still being intact, feels like the mantle's just being handed out like candy instead of actually meaning something. So, with all that complaining out of the way, I'm sure you're wondering, what went wrong and how would we even go about fixing it? Well, the cat's out of the bag at this point, but I think it all went downhill when Bart was killed in favor of bringing Wally back as a knee-jerk reaction. Circling back to Batman and using the Robins as a quick example, Tim Drake was unceremoniously ousted to make Damian Wayne the new Robin, the same time Barry and Bart were brought back. Only difference being that despite any fan backlash, Damian continued to be and is still Robin. To reiterate, I think what DC should have done was ride the waves and let fans slowly grow to accept and appreciate him as the new Flash, just like they did with Wally. Let him be the Flash for a couple decades and let him pass on the mantle to someone else, maybe Avery or Jess. But ultimately, that's the critical flaw about an ongoing universe like this. Real change is never going to last, and eventually the status quo will just revert to whatever the people in charge grew up with. That's why Barry was brought back and cemented as the central Flash, and the Flash will continue to see in TV, movies, and games for the foreseeable future. I still don't have an official outro, so I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out!